please stand with me and remain standing for the pledge to our nation's flag.
All right. Thank you for this honor, and I appreciate all of you that came to our community service last month. I just want to take a moment and say thank you for visiting and being with us. Let's pray over these meetings and proceedings. God, we love you today. We thank you, Father, for the elected officials that help run the city of Beaumont and all that we are required to do. I pray a special blessing upon them and each of their families. God, I pray give them wisdom and mercy and grace, oh Lord, as they make decisions on behalf of every citizen in this area. I pray that you would minister today, that you would let everything go according to your will and to your purpose and your plan. We give you faith today, God. We give you honor today. And we ask you, Lord, that you would just bless over every proceeding, over every motion and everything that is done in this room today. Bless every council member and their family today as we do the will of God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Vickery. May we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Ames.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Felshaw.
Present.
Councilmember Getz, absent. I'm sorry, Councilmember Getz.
Present.
Councilmember Neal.
Present.
Councilmember Pate.
Here.
Councilmember Samuel.
Present.
And Councilmember Mouton.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do not have any presentations or proclamations today, so I will move right into public comment. Now would be the time for any citizen who wishes to speak on agenda items 1 through 4 or the consent agenda. The time to do so is now. If you would like to speak on one of these items and you haven't already done so, please fill out the green slip at the rear of the room and hand it to Officer Morrow. We will call out your name. We would appreciate if you keep your comments to 3 minutes. The green light will come on when you approach the podium, and the red light will come on when your time is up. Again, this is for agenda items 1 through 4 or the consent agenda. I will open up the microphone at the end of our general business for anyone that wishes to speak on any other item.
I don't have any, Mayor.
Okay, there appears to be no one. Council, entertain a motion on the consent agenda, please.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. If you'll go ahead, please. Item number 1.
Mayor and Council, good afternoon.
What point of order?
I'm sorry.
Did we vote?
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm
Okay.
getting ready to do that.
We just couldn't wait to see Kyle.
Yeah. We're ready for item number 1. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? There's no one. The motion carries unanimously. Yes, sir.
Mayor and Council, item number 1 is an ordinance entitled, an ordinance amending Chapter 20, Article 20.03, Section 20.03.003 of the Code of Ordinances of Beaumont, Texas, by changing and amending speed limits and speed zone boundaries to the schedule for Major Drive, FM 364, deleting Chapter 20, Article 20.03, Section 20.03.003 G, H, I, and J of the schedule for Major Drive, providing for severability, providing for repeal, and providing a penalty. A week or two ago, we went through this agenda item, and the council asked that the new district engineer for TxDOT's Beaumont office or Beaumont district office, if he was willing to attend. His name is Chad Boney. He's here, and we thank you for being here. And so he's going to come forward, and I think council had some questions for him.
Thank you. Mr. Boney, if you'd like to come forward, please. Thank you for coming. And so I guess I really don't have to entertain a motion before we visit with you. So go ahead. If council, those of you who had any questions for Mr. Boney, please. Who? Councilman Getz?
Thank you, Mr. Boney, and it's a pleasure to see you in face. I know we've talked on the phone. Concerning the change in the speed limits on Major Drive, which a large part of it runs through Ward 2, part of it runs through Ward 1, and there's been a lot of accidents on that road. I understand, and I'd like for you to walk us through a little bit about what TxDOT did to come up with this determination from studying the accidents and crashes that the speed limit needs to be lowered.
Certainly. So, appreciate you inviting me here this afternoon, and just name is Chad Boney. Introduce myself. It's the first time I've seen any of you, and I appreciate that opportunity, and appreciate the interactions we've had discussing this. I'm sure very important topic. But so, question being speed limits and how those are set. And apologize, you can cut me off if this is a topic that you are incredibly familiar with, but I'll just give you the basic explanation of how that works. But the policy statewide, which is set by our legislative direction, is that we actually perform a speed study before we address changing any speed limit. But the intent and goal is always to set it to the most appropriate, prudent speed for that facility. So I think maybe what the question may have been is what happens is we go out and we physically radar the traveling public who is then using that facility, and we collect data to find out how fast they're moving. And so those who aren't inhibited by other vehicles are, say, in the lead of a pack. They are then radared. We take all that data, and then it's called the 85th percentile speed that we then use to set the speed limit. So what that is entailed is that you're targeting the speed that most reasonable and prudent drivers are already driving that facility up to the maximum speed limit. So currently out there on Major Drive 364, it is, we're talking from Tram Road at the north end through 105 and down to Folsom Road at the south end was what was studied. So in looking into such, the study was initiated by our office to go out and study just with the concerns that were out there. So they took this data, and then using that data, they figured out that the appropriate speed based on how that rule works would then be, actually it's currently 60 mile an hour at the north end at Tram Road. It breaks down, it reduces to 55, I believe, at Greenfield, and then it goes back to 60 from 105 to Folsom. That entire stretch would then be lowered to 50 miles an hour. So that was the result of the data that was used to try and set that speed limit. And we don't go radaring vehicles during 5:30 rush hour. This is typically done on a weekday off-peak time to see what the traveler is actually traveling that roadway. What that does is it tries to tailor the speed to what folks reasonably and prudently are able to drive it, of course, up to that maximum. And so that's how you determine the speed limit. You do have minor adjustments available to that based on data related to crashes, things of that nature. But in this case, what was then the result of that was a 50 mile an hour speed zone from Tram all the way to Folsom. That entire stretch, would be reduced to 50 in that section. So don't know if that answered the question.
Well, anecdotally, and of course, I don't have a radar gun, but anecdotally, it seems that people are speeding a lot more than 50 miles an hour along that road. What is the safe speed limit on that road? What is the road designed to carry in terms of speed? Is it 50, 55, 60, 70?
So if you want to discuss the engineering side of a roadway, the design speed actually is based on the curvature of the road, meaning both the rise and fall of the road when you're traveling on it, as well as the, say, left and right turns, and what you're able to maneuver those in your vehicle based on the curvature of the roadway, as well as the number of lanes, as well as the number of driveways, all those items. So Major being a straight road that is relatively flat, if there were no other factors on that roadway, be it driveways and other traffic signals, I wouldn't say that there's a design issue limiting any part of the speed zoning of that roadway. It's really just based on the travelers who are entering and accessing the road, the existing traffic signals, and turning movements. Those things are what give those drivers the context clue as to what is the appropriate speed, because otherwise it is straight, it is flat, it is wide, it is modern, it is good pavement. There'd really not be another limiting factor there other than the number of cars and how they're driving it.
And the complaints that I have heard from the constituents that I serve have primarily to do with those that are living in residential neighborhoods to the east of Major Drive, and they're trying to get out onto Major Drive to turn left to go south. And it's really, really difficult because there's no traffic light from Folsom. I don't even know where the next one is.
Delaware.
Maybe, well, going north though.
From Folsom to the north, the next traffic signal is at 105.
Was a 105. So with that being the situation, there's the cars have the opportunity to get up to, you know, whatever velocity they're going to travel. And because other cars are turning into and always feeding into the flow of traffic, it's there's no break in the traffic. So people are taking their lives in their hands when they have to try to go south out of some of these subdivisions. It's very dangerous, and that is my understanding where a lot of the crashes are coming from. Can you speak to a corridor study that TxDOT might be doing, and whether or not we can look to getting traffic lights put on that road somewhere?
So I guess there's two items that have been ongoing in recent past. One being an interest in having traffic signals at multiple locations that TxDOT had been in discussion with the city on, which were at Northwest, and another one that is topic of discussion was at Village.
Yes, sir.
But ongoing as well, the department, TxDOT, offered to perform a traffic study of that entire section for recommendations for how to handle the traffic that's on that roadway. And that traffic study should result in recommendations related to locations of traffic signals, locations for turn lanes, the speed itself, locations for access management that might be entailed, as well as if you then have these signalized intersections, what types of improvements need to go at them, timing of the signal, pedestrian movements, all of those natures, as well as where you might even need to currently or in the future manage access, meaning control, say, where left turns are occurring, rather than having the current situation of you can predominantly take a left turn anywhere you so choose when there's a break in traffic. So
Right.
all those things would go into the overall study to say these are recommendations that would improve traffic flow, improve safety, improve all those things that we all want of a facility that we travel on. But so somewhat two things at play: an overall study as well as interest in traffic signals in addition to what's out there.
And of course, that's more involved than just doing a speed study. This is a several month project. Do you have a timetable as to when the corridor study might be concluded?
So the study is 120 days in length is what our consultant has at their disposal to conduct the study. They are underway, and right now the draft report is due to both us and at the review of the city staff as well in late April. So it just initiated, work has now begun, so that 120 days would be by the end of April that we would have that draft report.
There may be some misconception in the community that the city of Beaumont has the ability to just go put a traffic light on this road, but this is a TxDOT road, so anything in the way of a traffic light would have to be run through your office, and we have to have collaboration on this. Is that fair?
Certainly. So traffic signals within a city with a population of greater than 50,000 then falls to that city through our municipal maintenance agreement to install and operate traffic signals, except those that are associated with a controlled access facility. So your interstate that travels through Beaumont, those still remain with TxDOT. But other traffic signals, even though they're on our system, then fall to the purview of the city of Beaumont or whichever city you're in. But in doing so, we still are responsible for safeguarding and responsible management of our system. So before a traffic signal is installed on a TxDOT facility within the city limits, there's plenty of discussion. There's a warrant study that needs to take place, and then there would be a signal design. There would then be agreements and documentation in place that we then understand what is going to occur, when's it going to take place, how's it going to get constructed, what are the materials, what is the function of that signal as far as the green time in each direction, the timing of such, and then maintenance going forward, all those things that we work together collaboratively to deliver a signal to the traveler.
Now, as I understand and recall, a warrant study was performed by the city of Beaumont as to the intersection of Village and Major Drive, and it came back showing that a traffic signal was warranted at that intersection. That's been some time ago, more than 2 years ago, and yet nothing has progressed towards getting a traffic signal at that intersection, much to the chagrin of myself and my constituents. What is the reason for that delay, or how did that get put on the shelf, or do you know anything about that warrant study that was previously performed?
What I can tell you is what I know, which is we have been given a warrant study, and it does warrant a signal. There was originally, I don't know the age of it, and I would have to bow to you that if you know the age of that study, I do not, but I know in recent months we were looking into the results of that warrant study, and there was a little bit of discrepancy, I think, in some of the data and discussion on whether or not that was related to maybe lesser travel during the pandemic, something of that nature. But we do now have in our possession a warrant study that passes warrants to have a traffic signal at Village. We have a draft design that was given to us, I want to say last week before was when we had that forwarded to us. And we're going to work with the folks and staff to look at any adjustments that need to be made from our perspective on that, and work on getting the approvals necessary so that that can be installed. As far as what may have happened in the previous year or two leading up to this point, I wouldn't be the person with that history.
Okay.
But I can tell you that is the current status, and that working on making sure that if that is the city's desires to have a traffic signal at Village, I don't see anything that would get in the way of that at this point, knowing that it's warranted and that there is a draft design in place. We'll just work on the details to make sure that we agree with that traffic signal design, and then I believe then it could move forward with our approval.
2 more questions.
You bet.
What about a warrant study for a traffic signal at Northwest Parkway and Major? Has that happened, or is that in the works?
Can't speak to what is in the works. We don't have a warrant study from the city for Northwest. We have ourselves gone out in recent weeks when this topic came to light, and knowing the sensitivity and urgency that folks wanted to know whether or not one was warranted and whether or not it could be in the future. We've done some traffic counting to try and run some of those numbers ourselves to see if it is warranted, but don't have a warrant study on that one, similar to the Village intersection that you brought up.
Okay. I know that there was some foundations poured at the intersection of Northwest Parkway and Major for traffic lights. I guess that's what they're there for. But apparently that was done, and there's no warrant study, is what you're telling me. Last question then. Who pays for the traffic lights if we want a traffic light in there? Is that a TxDOT, or is that a City of Beaumont expenditure?
So on the non-controlled access facilities, new traffic signals on existing roadways are typically the responsibility of the municipality who is wanting them within their city. Now, on projects where the department comes in and say we take a 2-lane roadway within the city limits and we expand that to a 4-lane roadway. We take an open ditch, non-drainage designed facility and create a curb and gutter storm sewer type facility. If in that process it warrants to have a traffic signal at an intersection, in our project we will quite often then construct a traffic signal and then turn it over to the city after the fact for the city's then operation. So it can sometimes be constructed in more than one way. In this case, typically those traffic signals on an existing facility, those are then prioritized and installed by the city.
Thank you very much. Been very helpful in helping me understand
you,
this
sir.
further.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Mouton.
Mr. Boney, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Mayor. My question is almost the reverse of Councilmember Getz.
Okay.
I've been contacted by my constituencies for the turn signal on College at 23rd, right at M&D. 3 of the residents that live in that neighborhood have had major accidents to the fact that their cars were totaled due to the speed. Number one, is there a traffic study being held, or has there been one in progress because of the speed and because of the residential area? And it's you have M&D on the right-hand side, you have Sutherland's and AutoZone, and then you have a large community off of 23rd, and 2 nursing homes, well, really 3, within that block. And it's been several accidents at that turn signal.
So
That's a loaded question.
no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm just going to do.
Let me help you, 'cause he hasn't been here this long. He's got a large area, right? So we talked about that stretch, and it was on your radar. College Street, Highway 90, from Interstate 10 going west, and you were looking at it all the way out to Major Drive. So 23rd Street is closer to I-10. There's been a number of wrecks there. So I
Okay.
think when we met in person for a Zoom call, y'all were looking at that stretch, studying the entire roadway.
So anytime that the city has an interest in considering speed zoning because they think there's a section of roadway that is not appropriately signed, okay, we're more than happy to then conduct a speed study if the city makes that request of a section of roadway. I can't speak to, because I can't tell you, I only like to tell you what I know for fact, and I don't
Right.
know for a fact that there is a speed study on that section. Very well could be in our discussions. I would have to go and check with my traffic office and determine that. But if there's not one underway, if the city would like us to conduct a speed study, that's what we do. And
Okay.
we would oblige you there and do a speed study to tell you what is the appropriate speed on that section of roadway. So,
I will get with our city manager.
okay, I will make sure that with them that if we don't have one going and one is requested, we will certainly do so. And the whole intent there is to make sure that that signing that's out there, the majority of the drivers, it seems reasonable, and that's what they then do naturally.
Right.
And that's the safest situation. And that's what we want as well.
And it's for the safety of the citizens of Beaumont, not only for those residents, but because it's so congested with businesses, even Conn's Appliances. I mean, it's M&D, Conn's, AutoZone, Sutherland's. So it's an entire residence. So it's pretty congested with a lot of traffic on both sides. And because TxDOT has the jurisdiction of it being Highway 90, as opposed to citizens knowing it as College Street, then it really needs to be looked at.
You bet. I'll make sure that, visit with Kyle to see whether or not we've got that study going in our office. If not, we'll get one initiated and we will look at that. That is not a problem. And would enjoy doing that for you if there's a
Thank you.
concern there.
Thank you.
We'll visit about that.
Mayor,
So-
you may not have this data, but just, and similar situations, where you reduce the speed, do you notice it cut the number of crashes down, accidents and so forth by 50%? Do you have any of that data, what the reduction would be?
So every facility is going to somewhat be
Different because of the
its own
traffic in and
animal
off?
because of the
Yes.
factors, and so much goes into what people's perception is when they drive a facility. The number of driveways, the type of development, the width of the lanes, the clearness of their
So
view.
there's no,
All those things go into what makes you or I, when we're traveling a road, and then you approach something, say you're in the country, and as you approach an area that you now see activity, signs, lights, driveways, all those things, that's when reasonable and prudent people tap the brake and start to slow down. Some don't, but we can't control everyone. That's law enforcement's side to try and control those folks. But so that's what we're trying to do, is match those two things, your perception and then everyone trying to drive the same speed. So as far as data that says when you then do so, will you change the numbers of crashes by a certain percentage? I would say that's going to be to each his own on the facility. Most of the time what happens is you may have a similar number of crashes. It just may change their type. Instead of having, say, a rear end collision from a situation, if you get it more appropriately speed zone, same thing with traffic signals. You may not do away with all of those crashes because a busy roadway is still going to have plenty of activity, and you're going to have folks who aren't always paying attention to driving the way they should. So, but when you do that appropriately, it can change the types of crashes as well as, you would hope, reduce them. But as far as 50%, 80% type of number,
there's no way to,
you could probably find some studies out there that would proclaim what it typically does,
Yeah.
but no, I don't have
You
those
don't have
committed
that.
to memory.
Thank
But
you.
we always want the speed appropriately matched to the driver is the goal, because that's what performs best and safest.
Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Mayor. Are most of the wrecks taking place at locations of intersections?
I would say, without reviewing them, yes. I mean, when you have, that is your most predominant location for collisions, is those conflict points. And you think of an intersection where all of those lanes and turn movements cross, that's a conflict point. And there are dozens and dozens at an intersection where in a straight stretch, there's really, other than a driveway or two, there aren't as many conflict points.
So if we have another study taking place now that's going to be done in April, what would be wrong with tabling this until we have that other study back?
That is reasonable from your view. If you'd like to do so, we can certainly do so. Only thing I would put out there is that, I mean, when we do a speed study, it's quite revealing. The speed study is going to essentially dissect that section of roadway and tell you how it's performing. It's just hundreds of data points on travelers that you're taking. So it is now shown you that the reasonable and prudent speed for that stretch is a certain number based on that speed study. That's typically what we're aiming for. But if we want to then not institute that and see what the results of this overall review are, I can understand that logic. But that's just a choice that you, that's why we come to the local agency, because we're not gonna go put up those signs if the local agency doesn't believe in what you're doing, because it's through your folks that you typically are having to enforce. And unless you support it, there's no enforceable ability for folks who then disregard it. So we're only gonna sign it if it's supported so that it can be enforced. But all those things, you know, play in this concert to try and create the safest facility we can. And we try and do our best with that, and it's a team effort with you. And so I can understand if we wanna wait on a study, that's not an unreasonable choice, but lowering the speed limit, if you said we'd like to go ahead and get that speed appropriately assigned to try and start changing the habits of those who aren't reasonable and prudent, that's not a poor decision either.
But that still doesn't help traffic trying to get across Major Drive without a traffic light.
Well, if you're able to then reduce their speed by 10 miles per hour, then it will give them a greater reaction time when they're making their choice of can they or can they not make a turning movement. But to give them a gap in traffic through a protected signal phase, no, it wouldn't be included with just a speed zone reduction.
Councilman Getz?
So I think you mentioned that you had acquired a residence right off of Major Drive, so you're probably seeing a lot of this traffic with your own eyes. Is that fair?
It's near and dear to me because you brought it up and so many have. I drove it several times today, making circles through there, giving it a look, and we've had our folks out there as well counting traffic and looking, and so it's on our radar, it's got our attention, and we're in this with you.
Yeah, and thank you, and thank you for coming in here and being a part of our community. We really appreciate that. I can hear cars racing on Major Drive from my house, and I'm sure you can too. You hear the engines zipping down. So while most reasonable and prudent people are willing to drive, I guess you said 50, I have had constituents contact me saying, you're trying to slow us down so we can't get from point A to point B. And they resist lowering the speed limit. It's a smaller number of constituents. Most constituents value safety and their life and limb versus how fast they can get from point A to point B. So I fall in their camp because, you know, if you're 5 minutes late for something, just start 5 minutes sooner. But, you know, if you're in a wreck and, you know, you get in the hospital, yeah, that's something we can do something about, then I think we should. And to Councilmember Neal's point, yeah, I don't think that it is necessarily, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other to whether we should table this until after your corridor study is done. What I do want to see happen is to get the traffic light installed that the warrant study said was warranted more than 2 years ago. The area has only increased in being built up since that time. If a traffic signal is warranted at Village Parkway, is there anything that the city of Beaumont needs from TxDOT at this point to make that happen?
Yes.
Okay, and what is that?
So we've now seen and reviewed the warrant study this past week, and we concur that it is warranted. The only thing we have left to do is to concur with your design. And so there are some aspects of the design that we have that give us pause that we need someone to correct and address some things. And as soon as that is done, we can then give approval for that signal to be installed as planned. And so we just need the design to be appropriate for that location. And there are a few items. That's what happens when you get several engineers in a room. There's going to be a discussion. But without going into those exact details, which if you're wanting, you know, I can tell you about the different details, but we have to make sure that what we do install on the state system is consistent with what the drivers expect, is appropriate for the location, and is going to be safe and handle the traffic. And at this point, there's just a few modifications we're going to need someone to make to address that. But we're close.
Well, I'm not a traffic engineer, although I did stay in a Holiday Express one time. But is there already a design that TxDOT has that the city can look to as a blueprint of what TxDOT would like to see at that intersection in terms of a traffic signal?
You might have to rephrase that.
Okay, so since TxDOT has to sign off on whatever design for the traffic lights at Village and Major is going to look like, is there something that TxDOT already has in the can that said, you know, if you did this, would be fine?
So a traffic signal design, believe it or not, is pretty unique to that intersection.
Okay.
It has to be based on the number of heads for the number of lanes, the lane widths that are out there. Then you have to look at the traffic that's actually making each of those maneuvers and then appropriately time that signal so that it moves folks efficiently, whether or not you need turn lanes, say a right turn lane northbound or not, and how would you facilitate that? So it's a pretty involved analysis. There's not there isn't just pull one off the shelf and say,
Okay.
let's pop one right there. And if you were doing just a two-lane crossing with poles and what we call span wire, maybe. But for a major facility of a 5-lane at this level, it's a little more involved than that. But we're close.
Okay. And you mentioned, but because we're close, that there was already a traffic design or a intersection designed for the signals already that you have a little bit of concern with. Is that right?
Right. We're just working through the details.
Okay. And you're working through that with staff in the city of Beaumont?
Yes, and their traffic engineer.
Okay.
Your traffic engineer.
Okay. So, Mr. Manager, any idea what kind of timetable we're looking at to get that completed and get all the details hashed out so we can move forward on that?
Depends on how much more information they want. Our staff works very well with his staff. They talk on a weekly basis, so it shouldn't take much longer.
So knowing this was when I came in and then found out, when you start in a new location like I have, you start to find out just where the priorities are. And I know this is a priority, and the fact that we've had this conversation a few times, I understand it is a priority. So I have directed my folks back when we spoke the first time to go ahead and get to a point to where we're ready to approve as soon as possible. And so they then have had communications last week, got a copy of the design. I looked at it and reviewed it. My traffic engineer looked at it and reviewed it, and then relayed those thoughts back saying, hey, we need these 2 or 3 things looked at. And then once those are addressed, we can give approval. And then it's just a matter of, typically your bigger delay is just lead time on materials. And in speaking with city staff, and I can't speak for them, but I think they relayed to me that they felt like they had materials on hand to be able to bridge that gap. I don't want to speak for them, and they then might throw darts at me with my back turned, but I don't know that that's an issue. So I don't think it's a matter of a lengthy delay to get something at that location with the situation as I see it and know in discussion with the city.
Last point I want to go back to, you talking about the speeds survey that you did, recommending that it be put down to 50 miles per hour. Lower speeds generally make a roadway safer, or maybe that's too simplistic, but I presume that in this case, the lower speed would make this roadway safer. Is that fair?
Everything we do is the intent of trying to make it safer. So if the results of the data say that speed should be at 50, my recommendation would be you should sign at 50, and that would be a safer situation than it being signed 60 now with the data we have.
So to get drivers to modify their behavior from driving, they're used to driving as high as 60, and a lot of them go faster than that. It gets to be a question of enforcement, because if you don't you can lower the speed limit, but if you don't do something to enforce it, the behavior is not going to change. And is this enforcement going to be done by just the city of Beaumont, or do we look for Department of Public Safety troopers on this roadway as well? I know they both are law enforcement officers and can write tickets anywhere in the state, but how is enforcement supposed to be done?
So within the city limits, and I can't speak for DPS, and I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so typically that's going to be a city function with city forces. However, I do know, I'm proud to say my brother's a retired DPS officer, and they have the ability to enforce in the entire state. So
Right.
they could, but I don't know that they're going to prioritize unless you work together to ask them that, hey, this is an issue out in a location within the city. They're typically not working those secondary streets within the city. But typically law enforcement's work together to try and fix an issue, address an issue. So I don't see where it's out of the question, but that would be a discussion between the city, even in the DPS, because they don't go at the direction of the Department of Transportation. So those guys with billy clubs and guns don't necessarily listen to engineers with pencils, so. But we're happy to be a part of any conversation if you have a concern there for enforcement.
Thank you.
Yes,
Counsel-
sir.
Councilman Pate, did you want the floor?
I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Chad, again, we thank you. Glad you're here. You're gonna love it. To try to wrap all this up, Councilmember Neal asked about the possibility of maybe tabling it, but my question would be, if we went ahead and changed the speed limits, if the further studies noted that maybe we need to drop it to 45, that really wouldn't be difficult for you to do, would it?
No.
Okay,
You can
so
still do it.
if we went ahead and moved forward with this and the study warranted changing it at some future date, a month, 2 months, or whenever this comes out, basically you're just taking 50 down, putting 45 up.
Right, so keep in mind, a speed study is telling you, it's essentially the vitals of the patient. You're saying, based on the vitals of this patient, this is the appropriately signed speed. That's not gonna change until something else changes. So if you add traffic signals, you add median, you add another lane, you add turn lanes, excuse me, your request, just like I was telling you earlier, would likely be, hey, we want y'all to go do another speed study. And it's going back and it's checking the
Yeah.
vitals again and saying, okay, what is the pulse now? And if we go back and check the pulse then and say, well, with a new signal at Village or a new signal at there in Northwest and a controlling of some access in some location, hey, the speed now is actually 44.2. Well, we'll go out and sign it for 45. And signs are, signs are almost like they're the simplest thing we can do,
Yeah.
other than we have to go through the process to do the analysis, get, your blessing, and then believe it or not, all those then have to then get blessed by the Highway Commission in typically a consent agenda type of thing at their monthly meeting, because it becomes then the law that gets enforced, that you can get a ticket for not obeying that sign that we put up. So all that goes into the process. But you're exactly right. If we change it to 50, at any such time, you can say, we want y'all to study it again. We're going to go study it again, and if the new data say that the vitals on the patient say it really ought to be 40, well, we then take that sign down, put up the new sign after those steps are gone through that I mentioned. But you're right.
And actually, I think we've done that before where things changed on a roadway and we did end up changing the speed limit. That's happened more than once on your streets and ours, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And that's typically a very common thing. And speed limits in every community are always a hot button item of discussion. Those who want to see them higher, those who want to see them lower.
Yeah, it's too bad you weren't here when we talked about Interstate 10 coming into Beaumont.
Well, sounds like it's a good thing that I'm getting here now and not then. But anything you want to ever ask questions about or bring us back, if you found this informative, just ask. We want to be a partner. We want to team with you. And it's really all about how together we can figure out what is the best, most efficient, and importantly, the most safest thing that we can do out there. So,
Okay, council, any other questions? Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate
pleasure
it.
to meet all you.
Thank
And
you.
if you need anything, please just let us know.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you. Okay, have you read the caption? Yes. City Manager? Okay. Council, you've heard the reading of item number 1. Is there a motion on this item, please?
Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor for approval. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Item number 2, please.
Mayor and council, item number 2, to consider resolution authorizing the city manager to award a contract to CTEX Construction Corp. For the Pine Street Storm Sewer Drainage Repair Project. This project consists of the construction and repair of drainage structures, including storm sewer pipes, junction boxes, curb inlets, and all excavation and backfill as required. We recommend that the project be awarded to the lowest bidder, CTEX, in the amount of $329,743.64. That's for the base bid, and in the amount of $16,999.92 for the alternate bid, which is for asphalt work on Elm Street, which is right off of Pine, down by Marina Drive. So the total amount being recommended is $346,743.56. A total of 90 calendar days are allocated for completion of the project. Funds are available in the capital program. Please know that this project was not budgeted for, planned for. What happened was Magnolia Cemetery called me, and Bart Barkowiak and I went out there and met with them, and we have basically a drainage system running through the cemetery that's been there for, we don't know. We don't have an easement. I don't think we've done any maintenance within that cemetery. We didn't know it was there. It's not even on our records. It may have been out there, 100 years ago. So, Mr. Barkowiak came back, worked with his staff, and came back to me and said, this is what I think we should do. Basically, we need to abandon that line and make improvements to what is known as the Elm outfall, which again, Elm Street is south of Magnolia Cemetery, very close to our animal care facility. We think this is in the best interest of the city. There are unencumbered funds in the capital program in the streets and drainage section, and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Council, you've heard the reading of number 2. Is there a motion on this item, please?
Move to approve.
Oh, wow. Okay. Councilmember Neal and Councilmember Pate? It's okay? All right. Is there any discussion? Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, what kind of a problem is presenting itself right now at the cemetery because of the condition of the lines that I think you mentioned goes underneath the cemetery? What's happening out there?
Flooding in a lot of areas, sinkholes.
Okay, is this a line that has just been there for a long time and not been maintained, or I mean, how does?
Yes.
'Cause we didn't even know it was there
Didn't know it was there.
to maintain it.
And this is a water line or a sewer line?
This is drainage,
Drainage,
stormwater.
stormwater.
Councilmember Pate?
Also, this is on property that is owned by a nonprofit.
That's
I mean,
correct.
it's not a for-profit cemetery. It was set up probably 100+ years ago.
That's right.
So they're basically doing this as a service to the community and have for literally well over 100 years.
Probably handshake deal that
Yeah.
never was recorded.
And if you said this, I apologize, but is this a small cemetery, or
No, it's very.
is the
very
larger one
large,
there
yeah.
that's on the?
It's on both sides of the roadway, but the majority is on the east side of Pine Street.
Okay, because there is a smaller one there that I had questions about.
It's really close to the animal services.
It's right down from the water treatment
Yes, sir.
place. And what other areas, what is that overall system? What other areas will that impact? And when I ask that, I'm talking about what other, where does that water drainage system connect to?
If you look, I probably should have had a map, but partway up into Magnolia where the line enters Magnolia Cemetery, if you go north on Pine, all of that drainage up Pine comes down and then currently goes through the outfall that goes through Magnolia Cemetery. So it's functioning right now. It's really not hurting the city in terms of the drainage, but what's happened is the end of that outfall, due to lack of maintenance, started deteriorating and falling apart, and then started eating up back into the cemetery and washing out. So it's in danger of washing out graves and all kinds of problems in there. So rather than go into the cemetery and try to work inside the graveyard with that line, we felt it was more prudent to cap the line as it goes into Magnolia. Magnolia can utilize the line within their cemetery for their drainage as they see fit, be a lot less water, a lot less trouble for them. We'll go back of curb down Pine Street, so we won't tear into Pine itself. We'll be behind the curb. And then when we hit Elm, we'll tie into that outfall at Elm and go out. Now, ironically enough, and this is to our benefit, but the outfall at Elm was in bad shape as well when we got in there and looked at it. So part of this project will be fixing and correcting that outfall at Elm as well. So it's really not going to net negative or net positive help the drainage to the city, because it was draining just fine through there. It was just eating up property within Magnolia at the end. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. I just had an interest as to how far would it impact where does the water come from once it reaches that Magnolia point? How far north does?
Quite a ways. I'd have to go and pull the system maps, but it's quite a ways up north of Pine, because everything around that area drains to drainage on Pine and then comes down Pine.
That's what I
and
thought.
then goes out. So it's a pretty good distance.
So so that would be impacted by the drainage at East Gill and LaSalle area, where we have had some major floods during the hurricanes. That was one of the areas that was underwater for several days.
Yes, sir, but once again, this is draining fine. We're not seeing any obstructions necessarily in this line, so I'm not.
As of yet.
As of yet. I'm not expecting that by doing this work, we're gonna greatly improve the drainage upstream. We may get some benefits, but I don't wanna mislead you in saying that this project is going to enhance our drainage to a great degree.
But it would diminish the opportunity for there to be further failures
It will
in the future.
improve the reliability of the outfall to where it won't impede our drainage going forward, certainly. And then we'll get it on a maintenance schedule, make sure we don't get in this situation.
So this is being proactive.
To some extent. Reactive in the eyes of Magnolia, I'm sure, who've been very kind to us and working with us.
Yes, Councilmember
Thank
Mouton?
you. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, once you get out there and start digging, there's a possibility maybe you may find another drain, do you think? Or do you know if that's the only one?
That's the only outfall through that cemetery that exists, if that's the question.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
that's the only one.
That's the only one.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're abandoning it so it won't cause any more problems.
We'll cap it to where the
Cap.
city water's not going through it. Now, when you get into the cemetery, there's a number of surface drains within the cemetery property, so we're leaving the line as it exists.
So they can
and
have.
so that they can use it. Otherwise, when you get into Magnolia, there's a road there that goes, and if we don't leave the line functioning for them, that's going to create a pond in there, because that road creates a dam. So they'll be able to make use of it for their own purposes. A lot less water, though, a lot less headache.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you so much, Barb.
I have questions
Oh,
for,
I didn't, I'm
for,
sorry, I
for
didn't see
Kyle.
you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this, as you mentioned, was not something that was budgeted for. It's something that has come up. You mentioned there's unencumbered funds in the capital program, streets and drainage, to pay for this. But by doing so, does it take precedent over other projects that have been budgeted for and that have been designed? Is that a concern?
Can you name one of those projects?
I'm asking the question.
No, there's not any.
Okay. And how much in funding is unencumbered in this capital program under streets and drainage?
About $700,000.
So this is going to take about half of that. And why do we typically maintain that type of a balance in there to handle situations such as this, or what type of circumstances come up where we might need to tap into that balance?
Well, what happens, if you go back to probably 2013, somewhere in there, when the council authorized us to borrow $42 million, and all those projects were spelled out. You budget for a contingency, and as y'all know, some projects come in more, some projects come in less, and we pretty much finished. Not all of those projects. Riverfront Park, as we know where that stands, that was listed at that time. But so we're in a good position that we do have unencumbered funds, and you know, it's good that we can be flexible and nimble when we need to. I'd say this is a need, that it's something we need to do. So you always hopefully have an unencumbered surplus.
Any other questions for the city manager? Okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'd like to tell the city manager, I appreciate your foresight in the way you handle the budget, in having the fund balance in the event of situations like this. That is a part of administrative duties, and I think that's a part of the foresight as a city manager, being able to consider those things. So I appreciate what you're doing. That's an area of town that's old, and there's many older areas in our city that we have things come up that we don't foresee. But that's what the fund balances are for, contingencies are for, and I appreciate what you do.
I appreciate, Councilman, you saying that. You've been here, served a long period of time, and you've seen it. You know, if you go back 17, 18 years, we had probably, I think our fund balance was down close to 8 to 10%. I think we had at that time, maybe, to go back and look, I think it was about, would have been probably $8 or $10 million.
I remember.
We have 44 million, approximately 44 million in the fund balance right now. And the great majority of y'all have supported those efforts through the years. Without that fund balance in place, with what we've dealt with COVID-19 financially, and the challenges after Hurricane Harvey and Imelda, we, the city of Beaumont, would be facing some serious challenges. And fortunately, we still look at it month to month, and we're on top of it, and we're gauging where we are with sales tax receipts and so forth. But our staff works extremely well together. Y'all have supported these efforts, but without that fund balance, you'd have some serious challenges, just like a lot of cities across this country. And we haven't laid off anyone. We weren't able to give our civilian employees an increase this year because of those challenges. We were able to give our police officers a wage increase because of their labor agreement, firefighters because of the labor agreement. So y'all approved a budget where we're going into that fund balance sum because you can. You don't want to do it year in and year out, but you can look at it, you know, every month, especially every fiscal year, and thank goodness we're in a position where we can do that. But it goes back, like you said, to that fund balance. Without it, it'd be very difficult right now.
And because we have to balance our budget every year.
And this is tied into that, but you know, when we borrow money, we do have a contingency set aside, and we're watching those projects, our staff, each and every one of them, and we've been able to manage that money very well over the last 7, 8 years. And then y'all approved, remember, 10 million after that 42 million. You approved 10 million. However, that was just for asphalt overlays, basically, street rehabilitation citywide, some concrete repair. So that 10 million was just for street rehab. But before that, you approved 42 million for probably 10 to 15 projects. And we've been able to manage that money very well, have some unencumbered funds that allows you to do something like this.
Which is something that was very needed. I appreciate it too.
Well, I
Thank
just
you.
believe that sometimes when you see a thing or two, it helps you to understand and know a thing or two. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, council? All right, there is a motion and a second on the floor for item number 2. All in favor of the motion for approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Item number 3, please.
Item number 3 is an ordinance of the City of Beaumont, Texas, providing for a general election to be held on the 1st of May, 2021, for the purpose of electing a mayor, 4 ward council members for wards 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 2 council members at large, providing for propositions regarding proposed amendments to the city charter, providing the form of the ballot at such election, directing the giving of notice of such election, providing for a joint election with the Beaumont Independent School District and Port of Beaumont, and containing other provisions relating to the subjects, and approving a runoff election if necessary. The administration recommends approval.
Thank you, council. You have heard the reading of item number 3. Is there a motion on this item, please?
Move to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Getz and a second by Councilmember Neal. Is that okay, guys, since y'all are together? All right. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion also carries unanimously. Item number 4, please.
Item number 4 is to consider authorizing the city manager to execute a joint election agreement between Jefferson County and the city of Beaumont for the general election being held jointly with the Port of Beaumont and the Beaumont Independent School District for the May 1st, 2021 general election. This joint election agreement is a requirement of Jefferson County for the county clerk to coordinate and handle all services of equipment for the joint election in accordance with the provisions of the Texas Election Code. The administration recommends approval.
Thank you, council. You have heard the reading of item number 4. Is there a motion on this item, please?
So move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor for Councilmember Samuel and a second by Councilmember Pate. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor of approval of item number 4, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries also unanimously. That concludes our general business. So I will now open up the microphone for any citizen who wishes to speak. If you would like to make public comment today and you haven't already done so, please fill out the green slip at the rear of the room, hand it to the officer. She will give it to the city clerk, who will call out your name. We would appreciate if you keep your comments to 3 minutes. The green light will come on when you approach the podium, and the red light will come on when your time is up.
I don't think I have any there.
Officer, is there any?
No.
None? There's no one that wants to speak today? Okay, I'll close the floor, and I'll move to council member comments, and I'll start with you, Councilmember Getz.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, we will have a Dallin West virtual meeting via Zoom. All residents are invited to participate if they like. The meeting ID number, if you want to write it down, is 470-963-218, and the passcode is 316966. Again, the meeting ID number is 470-963-218, and the passcode is 316966. I won't be able to attend. I have a previous obligation, but my wife, Allison, who is the president of the Dallin West Neighborhood Association, will be giving a report for me, and we will have our crime statistics given at that meeting as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Neal?
No comment, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Felshaw.
No comment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Pate.
Thank you, Mayor. Lamar University has cranked up the spring semester, and you'll start seeing, for the first time ever, football in the spring. So I would encourage you to reach out. I know there's tickets available. We've already started some of the other sports like basketball. But I want you to know that Lamar University has gone above and beyond to try to maintain the safety for both the players, the athletes, the coaches, and the fans. So if you purchase tickets to any of those sports, you can rest assured they're going to do whatever they need to do to make it a safe destination for you. And since Lamar is our university, and not every community has a university of the standing of Lamar University, I think it's incumbent upon us to support it as well. So if you get a chance, everything's going to be in the spring this year. Hopefully we'll be back to normal in the fall, but go LU. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Samuel.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. You know, I listened to our presentation today, considering the speed limit and the ordinances on the speed limit over on Major Drive, and I thought I listened to all the considerations of why it's important, and I heard it's important for the consideration of the safety of those that drive that highway, that part of the road. And some people consider its impact on others, how safe it is for others as well as themselves. I don't mean to be petty. I'm not attempting to be, and I'm not attempting to cast judgment on anyone. But we spent quite some time discussing that issue and talking about safety. I had a conversation this past weekend with my granddaughter, who's 6 years old, and her conversation was about wearing masks. You know, the considerations we have to make is we as parents and grandparents, we have teachable moments. We have times when things come up that we have to explain to our children. And I know I was always one that my parents raised me. It's not do as I say, but do as I do. And when I think about that, as leaders, we have an obligation to consider those people who are listening to us, those people who are looking at us, and our actions. Many things we do as individual council members, we change some of those things because we are supposedly leaders in our community. Now, I don't like having to wear the mask, but I have to think about more than myself. I have a 98-year-old father-in-law that lives with me. I have to consider him. I'm fairly healthy, but I'm in a vulnerable class. Now, we have classes looking at these council meetings. We have an order from our governor as to how we're to respond and how we're to act and what we're supposed to do when we're inside. How do we explain to our young people who we're telling to follow the laws and consider others, and we don't set the example by our own actions? I've made the comment before, I'm uncomfortable, but as a part of my duty to be here, I have to be here. I'm simply asking that as we think about the children that are watching this, whether it be a class or one individual child, we can't tell them when you're inside, wear a mask, keep the social distance. I don't know who has the symptoms of COVID. People are walking around that show no indications. I simply ask that if not for yourself, if not for those that are immediately around, but let us be mindful of the message that we send to our young people and others by the things that we're doing. I'm far from perfect. I do things that I regret I've done afterwards sometimes. But let us think about those things, because I do. And I just ask that we continue to be mindful of those young people and the example that we're setting as leaders here in this chambers. That's all I have to say, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilmember Mouton.
Thank you, Mayor. On yesterday, many people celebrated MLK holiday and birthday. And for Beaumont, it was quite different. Usually we start the day off at Douglas Memorial Church for many, many years, even before I was elected, where Reverend David Robinson hosted that event for many, many years. And he's no longer with us. Mm-hmm. Then we would proceed to Port Arthur for the luncheon, and then come back to Beaumont to Pastor Jerry High Church on the evening. Well, and yesterday, I was at Pastor Jerry High's church at West Tabernacle, but it was to bury him. He passed, and although we were not there to honor Dr. Martin Luther King, we were there to honor a great man in our city, a great man I had the pleasure of working with in Ward 4, and he will be there in spirit. And to his family, I send my condolences to the entire family and church family of Pastor Jerry High. It's been a lot of loss to so many families. Also to you, Mayor. Spoke with you losing your mother on last week. I was not here last Tuesday because I lost a dear first cousin of mine who works for the city, Fran Malvo, who will be truly, truly missed, not only in our family, but here at City Hall and at the City Health Department. It's been great losses to so many families. My phone went off while sitting here because we had surpassed 400,000 people that have lost their lives to COVID-19, a number that so many people are mourning and will continue to lose if we don't get this virus under control. But I want to also give condolences to Carol Jerome, who was a retired principal for BISD, Mrs. Frances Moore Williams, who is the sister of Mr. Ed Williams, who's also a member of West Tabernacle Church, Mr. Herman Tookie Granger. Can't say enough about he and his family. And also Mrs. Lily Broussard Hayes, who's the sister, the owner of Calvary Mortuary. So every day, families are faced with a loved one or losing a loved one. So I will say, keep these families in your prayers. Keep our nation in prayer because it's much needed. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, I had one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Fran Malvo, of course, used to call us all every month to remind us to come to the planning and zoning meeting. And my condolences to you, Robin, on the loss of your first cousin. I also want to respond briefly about why I'm not wearing this mask right now. And I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable, Councilmember Samuel. The way I look at it, though, is I am sitting here with nobody around me, and I do that on purpose. I've decided not to sit up there where I'm right next to anybody else because I am uncomfortable wearing this mask. It inhibits my ability to talk and be understood. And it's uncomfortable, as you mentioned. So where I'm at right now, there's no one within 6 feet of me. There's no one within 10 feet of me, at least facing forward. Don't know where the officer is behind me, but a mask is primarily designed, as I understand it, to protect other people, not yourself, but protect other people from things coming out of your mouth, things coming out of your nose, droplets. Where I'm at right now, that's not going to affect other people. I don't wear a mask when I'm driving around in my car by myself. I am interested in the things that happen at restaurants where you obviously can't take a drink or eat anything with the mask on, so people are, eating and drinking without a mask on, and apparently it's as if COVID isn't supposed to pay attention to that, but when you're walking to and from the door, you wear a mask. Well, that's what I do. When I'm interacting with other people, when I'm walking into this building and I might encounter somebody, when I'm walking out of this building and I might encounter somebody, or when somebody comes up to me, that's why I have my mask in front of me. I will put my mask on. So I'm not just flagrantly disregarding rules. I am trying to take a common sense approach to safety, not just for myself, but for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, however, I just have to comment on the restaurant thing. People can choose whether or not they want to go to a restaurant or not. We don't choose whether we come here or not. And the governor did put an order in place. Doesn't matter to me how or why. It's just that's what it is. And so I feel like we need to follow it. But I have not said anything except to Councilmember Pate because of Councilmember Samuel's comments. And as y'all notice, Councilmember Pate is up here and he's wearing his mask. And I appreciate that. And I know we would all appreciate it. Everyone does. But if you choose not to, then that's your decision. I would encourage it because the governor ordered it. And like the council member said, I don't do everything right all the time or perfect all the time, but I certainly try. With that said, I wanted to make some comments today about COVID-19 and things that are happening in our city. Most of you probably know that last week I made an announcement that I was not going to seek re-election as your mayor for an 8th term. But don't underestimate me. I'm not a lame duck because I'm going to continue to work till I'm not here. And someone asked me also this morning, how does it feel? Do you have a weight off your shoulders? Absolutely not. The last 2 days have probably been busier than I've had in a very long time. When we have natural disasters, when we have things like COVID-19, I guess as the mayor you can choose to be involved or not involved because the staff certainly does an outstanding job and can handle it, but that's not how I look at it. And the reason I say this is because if you haven't already heard in the media, I've asked the staff to take a proactive approach when it comes to vaccinating any of our citizens or those outside of our city that may want or choose to be vaccinated, because I'm hearing I get a lot of calls of people who absolutely want to be, but they can't find a place to go. I do know that some Beaumont citizens went to Hardin County, to the Brookshire Brothers, Sour Lake, Lumberton, whatever, we have been trying desperately in the city of Beaumont to get vaccines, and we actually applied for 5,000 yesterday. However, every week we have applied. We are concerned and confused as to why the city of Beaumont has only gotten 100 at the city. We've actually gotten a few more than that because there was other facilities that could not administer them in the right amount of time, so have given us another 100 because once you get them and you open them, they have to be used with a certain amount of time. And so those went, for the most part, to the people on the front lines at the health department, along with our first responders, fire and police, et cetera. But that was only 200, and that's been probably at least 3 weeks ago, maybe, about 3 weeks ago. And we weren't allocated any this week. If y'all don't know how it works, on Tuesdays we get a notice that says what's allocated. Typically on Friday they're shipped, and then typically Monday or Tuesday they're received. And I guess the proactive approach that I'm talking about, if you haven't already seen it, because the media has been blowing up my phone about it, is I asked staff, I talked to city staff yesterday on a holiday and had them mobilized to set up our civic center. We already have a plan in place. We're ready, just like we typically are when we have any type of disaster. And we have a schematic, and we set up our civic center to do mass vaccinating for COVID-19. They say if you build it, they will come, and that's how I'm looking at this. If we set this up, then maybe we'll get some attention and get some vaccines here in our city, because we at our health department probably have, I know we have at least 2,000 on a wait list with no advertisement whatsoever. It's probably getting closer to 3 right now. Please, with what I'm saying, do not show up at the Civic Center. We do not have vaccines. We're setting up. We're being proactive. Don't call the Civic Center. I'm going to give you some instructions in a second, but there have been people all along that have been calling our public health department wanting to be on a wait list. So we decided just to start taking names and also phone numbers so we can contact those people. Now, what we will do, or what the plan is right now, is that we'll use the Blackboard. Many of you have heard my voice on that during natural disasters and hurricanes and flooding and et cetera, where we can load certain numbers into that system and it gives a message. And that's what we will do once we know we're getting some vaccines in. In addition, and it's supposed to be set up by tonight, but we are going to utilize, many of you that have not been in the city for very long may not know, but one of the first things I did after I was elected mayor in 2007 and 2008, we developed and thank you, Bart, you were in IT then, and I appreciate your support. We developed a 311 customer service hotline, and that has proved to be beneficial through all of the disasters. We used it as a number to call for non-emergent rescues during Harvey, et cetera, et cetera. We used it during Ike. That's when we actually put it in. It was actually during Ike that we put it in. And so what we plan to do is use our 311 system, and they're working on doing that right now. I was told yesterday it would be up and running by tonight. Where people can call to get on a wait list, because we actually even sent someone today. There was a meeting in Houston with Governor Abbott to say we in Beaumont need some vaccines. I do serve on one of the governor's task force, and they have already contacted me, and he is committing to send us some. In addition to that, you may have read in the media that Jefferson County is receiving this week, or has received, 1,950 vaccines. I did talk with Judge Brannick this morning. He was out of town over the weekend, but I did visit with him this morning. And what their plan is right now is that they will give, this is straight from the judge, and I told him I was going to announce it, so if he's going to change his mind to let me know now, but he said he's not. But that they, out of that 1,950, that they will vaccinate their 1A and 1B employees. And then what's left over, which we don't know exactly what that number is going to be, they will split probably, this was his words, probably by population between Beaumont and Port Arthur. So we may have some sooner rather than later, certainly not enough. And if I already said this, I apologize, but we did apply for 5,000 more yesterday. There are a tremendous amount of people who are wanting to be vaccinated. They are older people, people with underlying conditions, people in their 20s, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. That's a personal choice, and I hope that we are able to do that. Public health stands for what you do when you have an infectious disease. Our goal in the city of Beaumont is to vaccinate as many people as we possibly can. We can do, out of the Civic Center, Once we get vaccinations, 1,000 a day is what we think. We did apply for a grant. We submitted that budget today and it won't go very far. We're going to have to submit another one, but to hire additional staff to administer those vaccinations. We have a staff that can do it to a certain degree, but certainly not 1,000 a day. If someone called me right this second and said, Becky, I'm going to send you 200 vaccines, I could call the Beaumont Public Health Department and we can do 200 just out of our health department in one day with the staff we have, 200. But we want to be a mass site for vaccinating people in our Civic Center right next door. You can go look. It's set up. It's already been sterilized. It's ready to go. And this is a proactive approach. I want to say that over and over because I do not want people to think that we've got the vaccines here. This is a proactive approach so we can let people know we are ready in the city of Beaumont. We want to give you vaccines. We don't have the vaccines to give you, but we are doing everything we can to get those vaccines in our city. And like I said, we've got a good relationship with the county, and I have talked to the county judge, and he will be giving us some as soon as they know how many they're going to need out of the batch that they get. When I talked to them, they were supposed to come in Monday. They had staff here to receive them. It didn't come, and as the time I talked this morning, Tuesday morning, they had not received them yet, but hopefully today or tomorrow. But we won't know that until after they give theirs and send us what they can. I'm reaching out to any facilities who get multiple vaccines. If you don't administer them with a certain amount of time, you have to do that. But secondly, if they don't repopulate your amount if you don't use them. So that is why we got another 100 from another facility that's not even in this county, because they knew they weren't going to be able to get them administered in time. And so they called and we were able to get them, and those did go to our frontline staff, first responders. I don't know how many I know we've done 200 here for that, at our health department, and but that's been in the last, like I said, several weeks. And then also the Medical Center of Southeast Texas called, and they had some, and we sent some of our fire and police over there. But I just want to let everyone know, again, we're not doing this yet. I'd love to be doing it right this minute. We can't. We don't have the vaccines. Please don't go to the Civic Center. Please don't call the Civic Center. We will be sending out messages via Blackboard to the people who have signed up. We will have availability for you to sign up on 311, hopefully by tomorrow or late tonight. I was not able to confirm that that's up and running right now, but I think it's getting very close. If you saw me texting, that's what I was doing, to see where we are on it. So I'm happy to answer any questions offline if anyone has any. I always say everybody in Beaumont has my cell number. So call me or call our staff or our Emergency Operations Center. But I'm very proud of what we're doing, and I can't say enough about how quickly the staff responded when I called them on a holiday yesterday and asked them to do this, because it was a brainchild that just came to me, I think, in the middle of the night. I don't know. But I do feel like that if we are able to show what we can do, that we'll get some vaccines. And, when you don't get what you need, you just try a different way, and that's what we're trying to do here. And if we set it up for no reason, that's okay. Minimal cost, right? We have staff, and we have the equipment, and we will continue to monitor and keep y'all posted as to what's going on through our city website and our emergency management website to let everyone know. And I will certainly talk to the media as I get more information, but I've talked to most of them today already. Okay? So it's not a posted item, but council, I'm happy to answer any questions y'all might have as well. Thank you so much. Thank y'all for coming. We are now adjourned.